Welcome to another episode of the Antifragility Reframe podcast, where struggles become strength and stress fuels growth. Today, our guest is an executive coach, the CEO and founder of the Wealth Source, and he will tell us about how he reframed career as he talks about career mastery. Mr. Kim Sawyer, welcome.
Glad to be here, Frank, and hello to all your audience out there.
Well, thank you for joining us and sharing with us your journey. Could you just get us started to tell us how you began to think differently about work, about coaching, and eventually end up telling us a bit about career mastery?
Well, that's basically the whole interview in a question. So let me break it into pieces. So I've always looked at things a little differently, Frank. Um, I think at first I wasn't entirely uh, clear on it and intentional about it, but I've, as far back as I can remember, always looked at things a little differently and sought to. I would hear what people thought. I would hear what people said is how it is. And I was always looking to see if there was an alternative approach from the time I was a kid, um, and began finding ways to earn money on my own. When I began reading and starting to explore what I really thought about philosophy and the world, um, starting at about age 12. Um, and then ultimately spirituality and I've always wanted to find an authentic, true to myself way of thinking and approaching things, um, because it felt right in the beginning. Now, at the same time, it often led me down paths that were not necessarily the most productive. I came out of an aborted Ivy League education where I took a gap year because I wasn't ready to move on and declare a major that didn't end for quite a long time. And I was a bit of a stuck point, a bit of an identity crisis, a little concerned about being a bit behind on my journey. So I looked at options and I decided what I might do instead is go the completely opposite direction because I find sometimes leaping out into the unknown and the uncomfortable yields surprisingly good results. So I joined the military, but I decided not to make a career of it. And as I stepped out of the military in the early 90s, I found myself again at a bit of a pivotal point. Well, what was next? I think I had completed the way I wanted to show up in the world, the parts of my personality I thought I needed, but I had no idea what to do next. And so at that point, I thought, well, I think I'll just go try to make a little money for the summer so I can avoid getting a job. And it turned out the idea I had was a very good one, and it took off. And by the end of the summer, I had a small local business here in Houston, Texas that began growing rapidly. And it looked like I'd found myself on another path in life that was unexpected, far better than anything I might have imagined if I'd set my course before I got out of the military. Career has been uncomfortable pivot points that have left me unsure where to go next, but requiring some decision into the unknown, and then determining a path that in most cases was uncomfortable and the most likely to lead me into something I had not expected. And that became an approach to life that I have embraced, articulated, systematized, and I actually bring to my clients in the work I do as an executive coach.
When you say you systematized it, can you tell us a little bit about it? How you help clients to embrace the unexpected, or uh, I wouldn't say the unhoped for, but the approach they had not thought about.
So you and I share something in common, Frank, in that my approach in my own life and ultimately my own personal professional growth, and then in my coaching, has been about shifting perspective in situations where I am operating within a certain way of looking at things that has me stuck and unclear what to do next. And I have found oftentimes by redefining the way I look at that situation or undertaking, it opens up surprising possibilities and new ways of thinking, new actions, and ultimately new results. So I took the way of thinking that we've been discussing, and it really hit me strongly in the pandemic, where I realized that things that I might otherwise consider a problem, I might otherwise consider a failure, I might otherwise consider a horrible turn of events, if approached a certain way, if I can reframe the way I look at it and therefore think about it and act in it, most often leave me with the most phenomenal gains in value in circumstances, often in ways I hadn't thought about, far better than what I might have planned, or if that never happened. I call it alchemical thinking in this particular case. And so I redefined what a problem meant, which is basically problems don't exist out there. There are only circumstances. But when I don't like reality and I want reality different, and I decide that's what's more important, I create a problem inside myself, which puts me in a much of a victim mentality, in a very reactive mode, in a very survival mode, which is the worst possible place to accomplish good things. So instead, I decided, what if rather than hanging on to my little picture of how I think things ought to be, what if I stepped back and just said, what if I just walked into this situation and these were simply the circumstances I was encountering? And I needed to develop a strategy and a plan that fit the circumstances. What things might I do? And I did that in the case of the pandemic, which was a huge upheaval in my and other people's lives. I began experimenting and trying things that were only possible in the circumstances created by the pandemic that I might not even have thought of. And soon, within a year, my business was doing better than it had ever been. Most areas of my life were thriving in a way they never had. But all of those were in ways I might not ever have imagined. So I developed a question. It's a mind shift question. I call it the alchemical question. And it's this: what's one thing I might do in the middle of this problem, quote unquote, that might leave something permanently better than before the problem happened?
So tell me a bit about this auto reframe you did with respect to careers. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Well, so to finish my story briefly, when I sold the business, I tried to start another bigger business with other people's money. Super excited, very passionate about it, had a management team, Series A financing, and was ready to get our second round and launch our first two locations when 9/11 happened.
Mm,
And that business went down with the World Trade Center towers.
mm.
And that seemed like a horrible turn of events, right? And a failure, something I really cared about, was taken away from me by things I couldn't control. And I pulled back to bear that way of thinking, and I began exploring consulting as a temporary alternative, like that business I did in the summer. And as I did that, I found that my ability to shift the people I was working with and their teams, to look at performance and leadership and make a difference, that's what was people responding to, and that's what I loved. So I got into organizational development, which is what I discovered in the larger corporate world, is that field. Got a master's degree, and while I was there, I discovered coaching, which was a new thing in the business world. And a young man named Sandy Vilas had just purchased Coach U from Thomas Leonard, that started coaching in those days. And he came and talked to us, and I said, this is the thing. This is what I'm meant to do. Business, for-profit, creativity, personal transformation, serving others. And I signed up for Coach U, was trained in coaching, and have not looked back. Now, Frank, had my business succeeded, I
Mhm.
never would have found what I'm doing now, which is the thing I'll do in one way or another for the rest of my life. I would never even have thought about being a coach if my business had succeeded. Now, that was a huge revelation in career. I've been coaching now for almost 25 years, and I've worked with executives and entrepreneurs in many circumstances. And I have found over the years that the thing that most successful business people struggle with, that holds them back, is their failure to look at their career as something more than their current job or business. Coaching I did, and I said, I'm going to help these folks begin to embrace their career in a new way. Paradigm shift, Frank. What if instead of being an employee for an employer, doing the best I can and hoping that employer will help me succeed and take care of me over the years, what if instead I looked at my career as a business enterprise with me as its CEO? I call it the business of my career, the business of your career. If I were a business with one long-term customer called employer, and I was the CEO of that business, and all I ever did was serve my current customer and make money and did nothing else about my business more broadly and into the future, what would anybody say? What would I tell that CEO? I say, you're crazy. Your business will soon fail. That customer will leave you. Your product will become obsolete in the marketplace, and you will find yourself out of business. Well, of course, many of my clients were hitting that point in their career. They may have been severed because of something that changed in their company. They may have been in a job with a boss that was terrible and not working. They may have found themselves totally burnt out and unfulfilled in their job. So, my challenge to them is, what if instead you began today developing a business strategy and you spent time outside your job growing your career for the rest of your career in all of its aspects, deliberately, strategically, and systematically? How would your career be different? And so I pulled together all of the different paradigm shifts and tools and concepts I developed into a single system that I call the Career Mastery System. And it is strictly that. It is changing the way I look at and think about my career, developing the skills and practices I need to build a management system that I run while I'm doing my job in the very best way I can, so that I get to choose what's next and when, and I get to have a say in where my career goes in the future. If you're a successful executive out there who's feeling stuck in your career and not sure what to do about it, I'm offering you my career mastery session. In it, we'll discuss your career history, where you are now, and what's really possible for you. You'll leave with some clear next steps to launch you forward. It will normally be a $300 session, but if you mention this podcast, it's free to you. Spots are limited, so I encourage you to sign up soon. I'll be giving Frank all the information you need to redeem my offer that he can share with you in the podcast notes. I hope to hear from you soon.